And you are looking live at Rouyn-Noranda, Quebec. That is NDP MP Christine Moore. She is about to address the claims of sexual misconduct against her. Former soldier Glen Kirkland alleges Moore used her position of authority to take advantage of him. Moore denies the claims and has reportedly threatened legal action against her accuser and the journalists who reported on the matter. We've been told that this is going to take place at 2 o'clock Eastern, then it was moved to exactly 2:15. Let's listen in live.
Je crois que tout d'abord, je dois vous dire que j'ai été totalement sous le choc lorsque la nouvelle est sortie. Moi et Glen, on a été amoureux. Je l'ai aimé. Il était super romantique avec moi. Puis je peux vous assurer que c'était tout à fait consensuel comme relation. J'en ai pleuré toutes les larmes de mon corps.
I have done nothing but cry. It's terrible to see how someone can want to tell so many lies. And I really don't know for what reason he's doing this. I received very, very mean messages, as well as some very kind messages from both men and women who understood that there was something wrong about this story. And I particularly want to thank the people of Abitibi-Temiscamingue who supported me and offered me their support. It will take some time to get together the evidence surrounding this situation, and because of the seriousness of the accusations, I am going to take legal action. This goes back 5 years, and I had to talk to a number of people to remember everything that occurred. So I believe that the simplest way to proceed would be to go through it chronologically so that everyone understands what happened. So, on June 5, 2013, the National Defense Parliamentary Committee, of which I was a member, began slightly late because there were votes after a question period. In the first part of the committee meeting, I asked a number of questions with respect to support given to spouses of military people. This was an important issue that I wanted to raise during that committee meeting. And for that reason as well, I also asked similar questions in the second part of the committee meeting of Mr. Kirkland. Now, I asked him to be sworn in, which was quite exceptional at a committee meeting. And under oath, he said he took only medication for arthritis. He said that he had been prescribed other medication but was not taking that medication. I found his story particularly touching because I also was in the military. And at the end of the meeting, I gave him my business card and I said to him that if he needed any assistance, he could always call me and I would do everything I could to try and help him. I then left the room. When I came outside in front of the East Block building, I briefly spoke to Jack Harris, who was our critic on national defense at that time, about the committee meeting that had just taken place. Then Mr. Kirkland came out with other veterans that I was familiar with because they were veterans that regularly attended our committee meetings, which were public. He was also with Mr. McKay's assistant, who was also a veteran. I asked what their plans were, and they said they were going to go and have a drink on a terrace. At that point, I said to them, but I had a little bit of time before my next meeting, and if they wanted to come to my office first, they were welcome. So when I got to my office, we had a drink together as a group, and I don't remember what kind of bottles I may have taken out, maybe some wine, maybe some vodka, and people served themselves what they wanted. I didn't have any gin because I don't drink gin. The door of my office was open, the employees were there, the riding employees were also there because there was an employee forum that week. My assistant, Alain Guimont, came to introduce himself to the group and stayed a short time with us as we had a drink. We left my office because I had to attend an event in the East Block. It was about 6:30 p.m. At the event in question, in the East Block building, I received a text message from Mr. Kirkland who asked me to go and meet him at a terrace on Spark Street. I went there with my assistant. Mr. Kirkland and Mr. McKay were having a beer when we arrived. It was very pleasant. We took some photographs on the terrace with Mr. Kirkland, which he sent to me afterwards. My riding assistants, Alain Guimont and Yves Dumoulin and Ghislaine de Relais, also came to visit briefly on the terrace as we were having a drink. When we were on the terrace, I asked him questions about his situation. He said he was in the midst of a divorce, and that's why he was still wearing his ring. I went back to my office to get prepared for the votes. In my office, Mr. Kirkland accompanied me to my office, and in my office we spoke briefly, and Mr. Kirkland kissed me, and I responded to his kiss. He said he asked me if I wanted to take my clothes off, and I said no, I didn't think I had time, and I was afraid the employees might surprise us. And he said, "Oh no, don't go and vote, please, please stay." And I said, "I can't do this. This is part of my job." So we left my office, and I went to the House of Commons to vote. And at 22:40, Mr. Kirkland was going back to his hotel. During the voting, he texted me to ask me to meet him at his hotel later. I agreed. I arrived around midnight. I waited in the reception of the hotel. Then we went up to his room. We had a sexual relationship in his room at that time. I left early in the morning, around 5 a.m., to return home to change and have a shower. He was taking a plane that morning and took a taxi to the airport. Before we left each other, he said he absolutely wanted to see me again, and I said I was interested as well. After that, we communicated by text message, by chat, Skype, email, and phone very regularly. He said he was going to come and see me in Abitibi, and I had even told my parents. In June 2013, he sent me his flight itinerary for that trip. A few days before his trip, he told me that his ex-wife had found out about his travel plans and that he couldn't come. She said that if people would find out about it, that would lead to gossip, although he said he wanted to see me, so I suggested we could find some solution, and I suggested that I could go and see him near Brandon. When we were in Kenouzi, we spent a lot of time in our room. We played various games. We went to the casino, to the beach. He seemed to be very happy. He told me he was in love with me many times. And they were great times. Then he took an apartment because he said he could not stand being with his ex-wife. I suggested he come and visit me in Brandon. He agreed. I sent him my flight itinerary 2 days before I was to arrive by email. He came to pick me up at the Winnipeg airport. We went shopping at Costco together to get some items. I bought a few things. While I was in Brandon, I cleaned up his apartment. We went to play golf. I met a couple of his friends. And then after that, we remained in contact. He was supposed to come and visit me in September in Saskatoon for business, but he was unable to do so. He told me that his divorce was looking to be quite difficult. He said the relationship would be difficult because of the distance, and as a result, I decided to end the relationship. I stopped communicating with him in early October 2013. I only remember one other communication with him when he shared his page stating that he would be a Liberal candidate. I can tell you that Mr. Kirkland will have to answer for his actions, as well as Rosie DeMano and Christy Blatchford. They all have an opportunity to retract what they said, but they will also have to respond in court for what they've said. I intend to take the appropriate recourse because I have been left with no choice. I want to thank all my colleagues in the House who are assisting me and supporting me, as well as all of the people of my riding. I will not disappoint them. The truth always ends up coming out. Given the extent of the allegations, I believe Mr. Singh had no choice but to do what he did. Yes, but I must admit that in terms of my political future, what I want to do is bring out the truth. What I believe is that it's important to do certain basic checks before publishing that type of allegation. When there are inconsistencies, I believe it's necessary to be more cautious. And when the testimony seems credible, I think it's important to believe the survivor, because it's very difficult to talk about what has happened to you. It was very difficult this week. It had a considerable impact on my family, on my friends, on my own health. It's difficult. It's difficult for me. It has an effect on me. And what I need right now, after this press conference, is to spend some time with my family, with my husband, with my children. I have to be able to take advantage of what I have with them and cry when I need to. I believe that it's very difficult for him, very difficult to see people say that sort of thing about one's wife and to not be able to react or to respond.
Madame Moore, vous l'avez brièvement dit en début de conférence, mais pourquoi tout ça maintenant, un règlement de compte politique, pourquoi est-ce que vous avez des hypothèses?
Je comprends pas.
I don't understand. I said that. I don't understand. I've been trying to understand, but I still don't understand. It's so mean as an attack. I just have no way of understanding.
Madame, vous disiez que vous aviez collaboré à l'enquête indépendante, tout ça, avec ce que vous dites, là, les trucs que vous pensez encore mieux, tout ça, est-ce que vous continuez quand même à collaborer à l'enquête, est-ce que vous êtes toujours d'accord avec le processus?
Oui, mais à ce moment-ci,
Yes.
on n'a pas confirmé si l'autre
But,
partie allait participer à l'enquête.
There's been no confirmation that he will participate in the investigation.
Maintenant, ceux qui voudront voir certains documents qui ont circulé, puis aussi, ceux qui s'intéressent aussi, j'ai quelques documents que je peux vous montrer. Mais à partir de maintenant, Mme Moore prend votre question, on ne commentera pas davantage et on vous remercie infiniment de votre collaboration.
And that is NDP MP Christine Moore speaking in her riding of Huayun-Noranda, announcing that she is taking legal action against Glen Kirkland, who made accusations against her back in 2013, and that she is also taking actions against a couple of journalists who wrote stories about all of this. Let's bring in the CBC's Margot McDermott, who has been listening along with me from Ottawa. This is a very different version of what took place on that day 5 years ago from the NDP MP.
Well, yes, she describes in great detail and names and says there are witnesses to her story, really of a relationship that she had with former combat soldier Glen Kirkland that started after he testified at the House of Commons in 2013. She really describes a relationship where he was pursuing her for a while and a relationship between the two of them, whereas he said, in fact, it was kind of a one-night stand after he met her in Ottawa in 2013, and that she kind of pursued him more than he pursued her, and he called it inappropriate, and that she used her power as an MP. So her story is very different. It sounds like a 4-month relationship that she has described. She also said that she felt that NDP leader Jagmeet Singh had no choice but to suspend her duties from the caucus. She's still part of the NDP right now, but she's not allowed to sort of speak for the NDP or take part in committees because the allegations published about her were so serious. And she also talks, Andrew, about how hard it has been on her, her husband, and her family to hear these things said and written. So some pretty blunt talk from her, and the fact that Moore is going to sue not only Neil MacDonald from CBC, but Rosie DiManno, who is a columnist with the Toronto Star, and Christy Blatchford, who also wrote about this in the National Post.
Yeah, and saying they will have to answer in court. What struck you, Margot, in terms of some of the details that we heard from Christine Moore about what took place over that day?
Well, that essentially it sounds like they met, she and Glen Kirkland met, they kind of got along, they had a drink on a terrace, she went to a vote, she went back to his hotel, and they had consensual sex, according to both him and her. So it sounds like there were lots of witnesses, that it was one of those sort of, relaxed relationships. That's her testimony, and she went into great detail about that. Whereas he said that she pursued him and inappropriately pressed alcohol on him, and that it was not something he really wanted. So the fact that she went into such detail, Andrew, and mentions that there are witnesses at various points along that day, and even afterwards when they met each other in Manitoba, shows this might be a very interesting court case, because, as you know, the defense of libel is truth.
And so one last question to you, just in terms of background on all of this, Margot. Let's go back to, she mentioned what Jagmeet Singh did in terms of her role now in the NDP following what we expect to be an investigation.
That's right. So she can't take part in committees, she can't speak on behalf of the NDP, but she's still part of the NDP caucus. We have no idea how long this investigation will take, and we don't know who they have appointed, if anyone has actually been appointed in this investigation. One more thing to note, Christine Moore was actually involved in other allegations against 2 other Liberal MPs back in 2014, Massimo Pichetti and Scott Andrews, who in fact were removed from the Liberal caucus after allegations. We never really knew who the allegations were coming from, but we now know it was Christine Moore. She is also the MP who was involved in sort of making allegations against Erin Weir, the former NDP MP, on behalf of other women in the caucus, the NDP caucus. So she's been involved in 3 different sort of instances or cases, as you will, with allegations of harassment and inappropriate behavior. She claims that what's happening here with Glen Kirkland is payback and really trying to make her shut up about this. So, it's her story against Glen Kirkland's.
Fair to say, though, politically, just for the NDP leader, for Jagmeet Singh, these have been, fairly difficult few weeks.
Well, yes, and in fact, he even said that last week in a press conference that, the NDP says, he said, we have other things that we would like to be working on, other things we'd like to be concentrating on as a party, not dealing with these allegations, first against Erin Weir and now against Christine Moore. It's certainly a distraction from the NDP, and it seems that the party is sort of unable to really find its legs the last couple of months in the House of Commons. Usually they're quite vocal, and the MPs are out doing scrums with reporters. There's just less energy right now in the party, and possibly this is part of it.
All right, Margot, thank you. That is the CBC's Margot McDermott, live in Ottawa.